Hey everybody, I'm Linnea and this is Givin Me Life. So today I want to talk about something that I used to love when I was a kid. I would say about 9 or 10 years old, and now 25 years later, it's still entertaining for me. I want to talk about Fear Street by R.L. Stine. So, back in the day, when I was a kid, it seemed like everyone my age were just talking about Goosebumps, which is also by R.L. Stine. But I was never into Goosebumps. I was like always Fear Street all day. And it just appealed to me more. And I think one of the reasons why is because it was intended for an older audience. And I think that's why I liked it. It was more interesting, more thrilling. So I'm like, okay, let me read the older stuff for the older kids. So anyway, once I found out that they were doing a trilogy, a Fear Street Trilogy on Netflix, I immediately got excited. It brought back feelings of nostalgia. I was like, oh yes, this brings me back to when I was young. So I'm excited. And then I was I heard that they weren't cutting anything out. So there was gonna be all the blood, language, all of that good stuff. I'm like, okay, this might be good. So I am about to check all of them out. Dwayne is going to watch with me.
Yeah, I put some kettle corn salt on mine. A little sweet.
Oh! Ooh! Caught that! So I'm gonna see what the trilogy is all about. Let's get into it.
Dang!
Dang! Oh! 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 They jacking each other up. Ah.
God,
Oh!
dang!
That was close.
Alright, so we just got done watching the third movie. And what you think of it?
I liked it. I liked the whole trilogy. I liked the whole. I like all three parts. I'll just start with the first one. Just going into it or starting at the beginning. When the first one first started, I didn't know what to expect. I was a little nervous at first.
I'm gonna say that overall, I like the series.
I liked it too.
I liked it overall.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one was probably part two.
Yeah, so that's what I was definitely gonna say. I was definitely gonna say my favorite was part two. I did like part one a lot. Didn't know at first. I was like, okay, is it gonna just be cheesy?
It started off kind of hokey.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was pretty hokey and campy all throughout the whole series and everything.
Yeah, but
it wasn't like over the top hokey.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of an example, like of another movie or whatever. But
yeah.
It wasn't horribly done to the point where like it just annoyed you or anything like that.
So I was just gonna say the beginning, I didn't know what to expect, and I'm like, and then once they got into it, I was like, okay, it's some real blood in here. It's some real slasher.
Oh, it was very slasherish.
Yeah, stuff.
Like it really gave you, especially certain parts, gave you vibes of like the Jason movies.
Mm-hmm.
It gave you some vibes of that. And I want to say like the character design for one of the characters was kind of reminiscent of like one rendition of Jason like in the earlier days and everything.
Okay, So yeah, but once they got into the first one, and I was like, okay, it's a little bit of everything in here. Like they didn't hold back. It's not for children
It's not a kids movie.
because I didn't know, because I was like, the Fear Street books are for like teens basically, I would say. And so, but they said that they weren't gonna hold back. Like they were going all the way with this, and I feel like they did do that. They did good with the first one. Part 2, I just felt like the second one was it was fun to watch. It was easy to follow. It was I don't know. It was fun to watch. Like I said, it was easy to follow. It was a lot going on. I really liked the whole they were at camp thing. And go ahead.
So like, you know, I would go in order. I go 2, 1, 3 as far as like how I liked them and all. And it was just because, so I felt like part 1 did a really good job of like introducing you into like what was going on for this whole series and everything, and they did a good job of connecting the stories together too, like, you know, how part 1 went into part 2 and all that.
Oh gosh, yes.
Part 3, like they did a real good job of connecting the stories and all. They did a good job in part 1 introducing it all, and then in part 2, like you said, it was a fun watch. It got extremely slasherish in part 2, and so like there was some kind of exciting moments in part 1, but in part 2, after it got going, it was almost nonstop. I love the blood. I love the gore. I love the action. And like, it don't even have to be gore as far as like killing. It's just like when they were in the one scene, I was like, oh, that is so nasty. Like, I like that stuff. Now, I will say part 3, they kind of lost me. You could maybe look at this as a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler though. They more focus on a love connection rather than the overall story in part 3.
Yeah.
And they did that in part 1 also, but it wasn't an overbearing part of the story in part 1. So even though it was there, and I don't like unnecessary love stories being put into movies and stuff.
Because you don't like love.
Anyway.
You don't like love stories. You don't like love movies.
Anyway, so in part 1, it wasn't overbearing, so it was still like, okay, well, it's not really taken away from the movie too much, like the overall storyline. But in part 3, it was like that was the main thing, and it just it kind of like got away from like what the whole storyline was supposed to be in general. And I just kind of got disconnected from the movie, and it got hard for me to like pay attention.
So I liked part 2 of part 3. So
it got better.
So part 3, the third movie had 2 parts in that movie,
basically,
and
it had a twist in it also. I won't say what that was, but there was a nice twist.
There was a nice twist.
It did start getting better, and like you said, in the second half.
In the second half, I like the second half better, and but I was gonna go back. You brought up a good point, which I was thinking about all along while we were watching the movie. They did a really good job of connecting everything together. Really good job. And so, you know, you would go back, or, you know, you might be looking at something in part 3, and then they'll take it back to something in part 2, or you know, show you how, like, the connection and everything. So that was really interesting. Everything was connected.
Yeah, it was kind of like how, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, how it went from part 1 to part 2, and then part 2 to part 3. They actually showed the last few minutes of the previous movie, and then used that to go into the next movie. So they didn't do that exactly with Fear Street, but they did something very similar to it, in my opinion, at least. So it made it like real easy to make the connections from movie to movie, where sometimes you don't see the connection in the movies in sequels and all, unless you're like really thinking about it, or you go back and watch it over again. Like, oh yeah, I do remember that part right there. Now, one thing I will say, what was I going to say about part 3? Oh yeah, so one thing about part 3 is, so, and I mentioned this while we were watching it, that if you're familiar with American Horror Story, they kind of did an American Horror Story thing with part 3 where they brought in characters from parts 1 and 2 to play characters in part 3, and I felt like it was unnecessary to do that.
So it was unnecessary how they brought in characters from the other ones to play the part in 3.
Yeah, because like, have you ever watched American Horror Story?
Mm-mm.
So in American Horror Story, they, every season is a different story, but then they bring in a lot of the same character or a lot of the same actors and actresses to play a character in that season and everything.
To play a different character?
Yeah. And sometimes they'll play the same character, and then one season they had one person playing 2 different characters in the same season and all. Why
would they do that?
I had to stop watching it. But if you understand that they did that for part 3, it was characters in part 1 and part 2 that was playing as characters and playing different characters in part 3.
But at least they made it connect.
Well, I was gonna say that I kind of feel like I understand why they did that, so that way you can keep a connection with the story and everything, and keep a connection with the overall Fear Street story. I just feel like it was unnecessary though, because in part 2 it was all new characters, and you still had that connection going on. And that's another thing, because like I said, I had to stop watching American Horror Story, and kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So when I noticed that, I was like, oh, okay. It just started to take away from it again for me.
Yeah, they didn't have. I get it. I get that. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. They didn't have to do that.
I'm curious who directed part 3. Like, if it was the same person in all 3 of them, or if it was somebody different in part 3 than it was for 1 and or 2.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. I will say I am willing to go watch 3 again to see if I like it better the second go round.
Yeah.
That does happen sometimes.
Yeah, I think it was just like the old, and they went back, like for the camp they went back a little bit, but that was still a time period.
They started speaking with those Irish
But when
accents.
they went all the way back
they
started
with Scottish accents,
speaking with those accents.
Scottish or Irish, one or two.
And I was like, man, I just couldn't concentrate on it in general. I don't know. Anyways, but when I got to part 2 of part 3, yeah, I felt better again. So overall, though, it was well done. Overall, all 3 parts, the connecting the stories, I was impressed, and it makes me want to go back and now read some more books. I want to read some more. I don't really have time to, but I do want to read some more.
See, you said earlier that you were the Fear Street reader and everything. I was a Goosebumps person. I only read like 5 of those books, 5, 6 of those books, something like that. But I was the Goosebumps guy.
Yeah, I was Fear Street.
Honestly, I never even heard of Fear Street until these movies were about to come out. Like a couple weeks before they came out, people were talking about it. I'm like, what is Fear Street? Or at least I don't remember hearing about it. So,
and I don't know how I was introduced. I don't remember how I was introduced to it. I just know I came across and I was like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah. This is for me. I'm like, I need to the Goosebumps. I need some more like this.
I enjoyed them.
This was for the older crowd. I needed to, so it was more interesting to me.
That's because you got an old soul from birth.
I do have an old soul, and
Yeah, but I don't know if you or anybody else made a connection with my shirt. So since I'm not familiar with anything with Fear Street, I didn't have any Fear Street apparel or anything like that.
I don't even think they make Fear Street. I mean, I'm sure you can find it if you look.
It probably just isn't that popular or whatever, as far as like in the stores and stuff like that. But I figured like, okay, horror
But now
movies,
that you mention, I want a Fear Street shirt. That would be. I'm gonna have to find one.
Yeah, but I figured like, you know, horror movies, Fear Street, Nightmare on Elm Street.
It was the best you could do.
Yeah, it literally was the best I could do.
You did well.
Elm Street, Fear Street. I had to make that connection somehow, so that's why I'm wearing the horror movie shirt that she bought me. Like what, last year? Yeah, last year. I forget when.
Was it last year?
Yeah, it was like last summer, I think.
It was before that. It was before last summer.
Okay, well, last spring.
Yeah, I mean, it was before COVID hit.
No, what?
Yes, it most definitely was. It most definitely was.
I'm gonna check the receipts.
You can check, because you wore it to work. And so,
So we about to wrap this up.
yes, we'll wrap it up.
But, you know, y'all should leave comments about, you know, what y'all feel about Fear Street and all that.
Yes, comment. We want to know what you think. Have you seen it? Do you plan to watch it? If you have, which is your favorite? All of that stuff. Let's talk. I want to know.
And make sure you know, share, comment,
Yes, like,
subscribe,
share, comment, subscribe,
all that great
all
stuff.
of that. Alright, so I wanted to know, again, I mentioned that when I used to read the Fear Street books, I was like 10 years old. So I was curious, if I was to read the books now, would it still be like as good to me? Would it still be scary and all of that good stuff? So I went out and I purchased 2 R.L. Stine books. I'm sorry, 2 Fear Street books by R.L. Stine. Because I had a I had a huge collection. Obviously I was a fan, so I had like this huge collection, and I mean, those books are long gone. So I had to buy some new ones. So I actually went and got Double Date and The First Horror. So now I didn't finish them both, but I did just read a little bit, like enough to just get a feel for it again, and still good.
What made you choose those 2 books?
Okay, so The First Horror I wanted to get, and then it's 99 Fear Street, The House of Evil. So because it's The First Horror, it is like where it all started, basically. And I never read this one. So actually, I also got these because these are two of the few that I have never read. And so, and surprisingly, I never read, which I think this is the very first one. And I remember wanting to read Double Date, but I just never ended up getting it.
Why you want to read that one? Like, did you hear something about it, or did you just like the title?
Nope, I just would go off the title and the picture. Back when I was younger, it would be the title and the picture is what I would go off of, and then, you know, I would read to see.
Like what most kids do.
Yeah, what most kids, yep. And, you know, I'd be like, okay, what is this about? Okay. Yeah, but the title and the picture and the title are the first things that would, you know, catch my eye and determine if I wanted to read it or not. So I picked these 2, and I read some of them, and I'm like, this is still good stuff. I am grown now, been grown for a minute now, and it's still good. And it's still good. So I just wanted to say thank you, R.L. Stine, for keeping me and many others entertained for so many years. And thank you for giving me life.